Hey, welcome to the show, everybody. My name is Mike. I will be your host. This is the Leadership Toolkit. It's the definitive leadership podcast for you to learn and grow. And I love to have amazing guests on each week that are able to share their successes, maybe some of their challenges, the things that have helped them come up through leadership in all different facets of business in all different areas of their life. So today I am super excited. I have a longtime friend of mine, Miss Nancy Simmons. She is a veteran of the auto industry. She's spent 30 years holding positions in HR and fixed ops and F&I, and she's got so much knowledge on business operation and leadership. And she is a faith-driven, awesome, kind individual from the inside out. So I am really excited here to bring on my friend Nancy Simmons to the show today. Good afternoon, Nancy. Thanks for joining me.
Oh, it's such a pleasure, Mike, to be here. And I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to serve in a small way and share my story of how I came up to leadership, how I promoted myself through the years into leadership positions.
Sure.
And I say that because in management positions, we're promoted by other people, right? But in
Sure.
leadership, it's really something that I believe comes from within. And we promote ourselves or we empower ourselves to take on this role.
I think that is an awesome, awesome perspective. If you would just give a couple minutes for the audience, if they may not know you, minute or two, give a little bit of what your background is, kind of who you are. Feel free. You said right beforehand, hey, I want to share a little story on how I came up. I would love to hear that. So
Oh, sure.
if you would.
So I've been in the auto industry, as Mike said, for 46 years now. I started when I was 17 in the parts department. And it was kind of just like a little part-time job while I was going to school. Never, ever expected that this was going to be my long-time career. I've always had this strong just desire within to lead, but in a servant leadership type of way. And I just wanted to share a story with you through the years of how I empowered myself to take on leadership roles, which kind of all will make sense in the end. But as a
Sure.
little girl, very little girl, we used to play dress up and do plays like Cinderella. And I never wanted to be one of the characters. I wanted to be the director, the costume director. That was kind of the role that I always played. Going to school, I was always involved with student council. And I don't know why. I didn't know why at the time. It was never for authority or to have power. It was more so because I saw opportunity to serve, to use my God-given gifts and talents for the betterment of the whole. So I became involved with cheerleading. And right after I graduated from high school, I became the cheerleading coach for that high school.
That's
And
awesome.
again, right, I had to take on a role. I taught religious education. I think 3 years into teaching second grade, I became the director of religious education for about 500 to 600 families. And that was on a volunteer basis outside of my secular career. So as you can see, I'm working at the car dealership. I'm coaching cheerleading. One day I'm walking through the office. Now, this was a mega dealer back in the day, and that was not very popular, but he owned 7 stores and 13 franchises.
Okay.
And he said, Nancy, what are you going to school for? And I'm like, civil engineering. And he said, why? And I said, well, my guidance counselor said I was good in math. And he says, I'll tell you what, switch to accounting and I'll pay you tuition. So,
Wow.
right. So this gentleman, this dealer, very busy guy, saw something in me at 17 years old. And he was really one of my true role models for servant leadership. He inspired me to, hey, I can do this. I can align something that I'm passionate about, which was the car business, my skills, which was mathematics, accounting, and really find my purpose in life. So I went on to do that. And at 22 years old, I was made an office manager. And the story with that is kind of funny because I went into an office that had 4 women combined had over 100 years experience. And
Wow.
right. And I am this little 22-year-old girl. I'm going to be your new boss. Right. So 3 of them, I found out later, wanted my job. So I had to think fast. How am I going to get these women to embrace me, to like me, to respect me, to trust me? So one day I walked into the office. They were kind of all in a huddle talking to each other. And I said, I need to share with you a little story. So I told them about my cheerleading coaching. I said, last night I was coaching my high school team, and we made this 3-tier pyramid. And we had all the strong girls at the bottom, and the medium built girls were in the middle. And then the little tiny girl was up at the top.
Hmm.
And it really made a beautiful pyramid. But each person played such an important role in that pyramid. So with those bases were the strong foundation. The middle was like the glue that holds it all together. And the person on the top who had all the glory, she would just fall flat on her face if any of those others walked away, right?
Sure.
So I said, this is how we have to think about it with our team. So I bring to the table computer knowledge because they were still doing everything manually back then. This is like 1980. So, and I said, you women bring all this wealth of knowledge with accounting and your organization skills. So together, if we operate in a very, with synergy and a very cooperative way, we'll make an awesome team. And from that moment on, we worked very well together. So I thought that was important to share how servant leadership, even though I didn't know what that term was,
Sure.
um, but really helped me get through that little segment of my life.
Well, and I think it's really good when I think one of the things that you bring up, and you brought this up even without saying it, as I'm listening to you, is the fact that when you get put into that role, there's two things that I heard you sort of allude to. One is the fact that you just did it, right? You just jumped in. You said, okay, hey, and probably at the time it was maybe a little intimidating because you had all these women with experience, but you said yes. And I think that's something that especially new leaders, you need to hear that. We're never going to be fully prepared for that role that we're going to take on. I don't think if you're fully prepared for it, that opportunity's passed you by. Just think if you hadn't said yes at 22, then what? Right? How would your life be completely different?
Right.
The second thing that I heard you say is the fact, or second or third, one is you were willing to bring everybody together and have a face-to-face, real and genuine communication with people.
Mhm.
And I think so often, especially right now, people want to skirt the issue, because it's like if I say something directly to someone, it might hurt their feelings. And so as leaders or especially in business, we temper ourselves for fear of what we think might be. And when you're sharing that story, I hear you saying, like, look, you just grab everybody and you put them together. And the fact that you genuinely cared, you took this piece from your life. Hey, I'm this cheerleading coach, and here's these things, and let me share how I applied it. And then you closed beautifully because you said, hey, we worked together awesome after that. So
You did.
I,
And in anything, whether it's your job or a civic organization, a charity you belong to, your home, I believe communication, collaboration, they're just such essential segments of your leadership skills. And in this day and age, especially,
mhm,
people want to be heard. They want to feel like they're a part of everything, right? Um,
yes,
so the word empowerment's thrown around a lot loosely, but empowerment can be a daily invitation. So like I love the word let's. It's a simple word, but it's a word that says, hey, we're going to do this together. Let's have a great day today. Let's tackle this issue that's been kind of hanging around for a week or so.
sure.
Let's put our heads together, So collaboration has always, always been very, very important to me.
Mhm.
Um, I think you were part of True Pro when I had kind of started True Pro years
Yeah.
ago after the GM bankruptcy. And one of the things that I had coined was TOLD, which I love acronyms, but it's
I do too.
TOLD,
Yeah.
Think Out Loud Development. And it's really inviting people to share their thoughts, share their opinions, not the old school of like, hey, do as I say, not as I do. Your opinion doesn't matter. But how many times are you in a room, in a meeting, and whoever's leading the meeting, the manager might say, hey, does anybody have any questions? Does anybody want to add to this? And everybody's quiet. And you know their wheels are turning and they have something really great, a golden nugget that they can share, but they don't, in fear of rejection, in fear of that's never going to work. We tried that before. That costs too much money. All those objections, right?
Sure.
So if you empower people to tell you what's on their mind out loud, you are bringing in a wealth of knowledge from experience, from other skill sets, from other talents. And rather than, just this is my way or the highway
That
mentality,
doesn't work anymore
doesn't
anyway.
work. No. So, as we talk, I wanted to tell you a little bit about something that I got involved in years ago.
Well, let me before
Okay,
you move on, because especially for the people, if you're listening to this, and I always encourage people to take notes. When you take notes, it makes it real, right? And so I would encourage you to hear, not just, okay, we'll glaze over it, but really hear what Nancy's saying there. And I want to slow down and go back on something too. I know you have something to share, but I think that's a really powerful, and I remember you saying that, TOLD, think out loud development. So you need to make sure and write that down and hear what she's saying on that, because I think that's a really, really important piece. I'll drop it here in the notes. So I'm sorry to interrupt you. Carry on, please.
So with that said, years ago, I had personality tests when I was going from a controller into the F&I office.
Sure.
That was just a standard process. What's your personality type?
Hmm.
Of course, I came up with as a high in the DISC personality assessment, a very high I, which is influential. Then my second was D for dominant, steady and compliant last, which I really shouldn't be a controller at that point. I made a stronger F&I manager.
That's funny.
But going through the years to really use these personality assessments to build teams within your organization, whether it's a focus group, just a group of people that are being heard, that are empowered to come up with a solution and find out who's the D, who's the I, who's the S, who's the C. I also use Predictive Index. I'm PI certified,
Okay.
which is another platform. There's free 16 personalities, but I
Yeah,
urge
I like
you
that one.
to do that in your place of business because I look at this as the platinum rule, right? Not the golden rule, but the
Okay.
platinum rule is golden rule we know is treat other people as way you wish to be treated, but the
Yes.
platinum rule is treat other people the way they wish to be treated because you would never ever speak to a D personality the same as you would speak to a C person, right? And when you're formulating these groups, it's very important to have somebody to fill that circle from each one of those segments. So you have a complete lineup of the person that's going to make the final decision, the person that's creative and intuitive, the person that will do the spreadsheet for you, right? And the person
Right.
that will make sure that you're legal and regulated. So I love those personality assessments. I think they're great for recruiting before you bring somebody on board, but they're also great for the current team that you're trying to lead. So
No, and that makes sense. When it comes to personality assessments, let me ask you though, is you're not alluding to that those are a replacement for like actual one-on-ones and genuine human connection. That's just your starting point, right?
that's the starting point, and that starts from before they're hired.
Sure. So I want to go back in time a minute here because there's so much we could cover. One thing that you had brought up, you said, okay, well, what was, and you brought this up to me in conversation, and then when you were talking about, hey, at 17 I got thrown into this, at 22 I got thrown into this office manager position. At that point in your career, could you pinpoint because we hear this a lot in leadership and in business, like, what is your why, right? What's your purpose? And I think we all as humans really can struggle to understand that sometimes. I know I did coming up. You go, well, what is the so when did you discover what that was, and how would you encapsulate it? And I'll ask a third question. We'll come back to this. If you have somebody that's watching or listening to this episode right now and saying, hey, Nancy, how can I find my why and my purpose? What advice would you give them as well?
Oh, that's a good question. So I know we hear a lot about the why, what is your
Hmm.
why? What is your purpose? What's your true mission? Why are you on this earth? Why did God create you and intend for you to be here? I think back, I'm very, very strong in my faith. I think you know that, Mike. We share a lot of
Absolutely.
those
Me too.
same beliefs. Um, and if God wanted to make people, you know, be androids or robotic beings, right? He could have done that, but he made us all scientifically. We know we all have a separate DNA, but he made us with different gifts and talents, and we really need to dig down deep and discover what those are to really become that person that God intended you to be. So I always had a strong faith from a little girl. I grew up with grandparents who were very like pillars of my church. But not only church going, I had a very, very strong relationship with Jesus at a very
Mhm.
young age. And I think if you were to say who is the person I follow and who would be who I consider the best leader who ever lived, it would have to be Jesus Christ. And I take my cue from him. He was a servant leader before we called him us people servant leaders.
Sure.
Um, he called on people of all walks of life, and not only to be his followers, but to be the future leaders of the church. Right. So from day one, he was mentoring, he was guiding, he was teaching, he was growing these people in their faith. And how did he do that? By his own actions. So to be a strong servant leader, you really need to lead from example. You need to live with integrity and have that code of conduct, and then people will naturally follow you and
Hmm.
hopefully mimic you. And I really take my cues from Jesus himself. And what was your second question, Mike? I'm 64-year-old
So
brain.
no, no, that I think we can hang on that for a minute, because I think that you're I'm with you. I'm the same way. And I have said many times, when I'm having conversations with other business people, and what's interesting is the more conversations I'm having about business, the more often will come and be centered around Christ or people's faith, or in that, we'll call it the religious sect, right? And people are giving more praise to God. We're seeing it sometimes now even more in the media, and I think that's something that's valuable. I mean, as humans, we are somebody that we are a race that worships, and we understand and believe in God as a whole. I almost think it takes more work, and this is just my opinion. I think it takes more work to not believe in God than it does to just know that he's there. And so when you're talking about servant leadership, and I've heard it said before, I've heard this said in some circles in business, and especially if someone's listening to the podcast, they might connect with this. It's often people say, well, they would rather see a sermon than just hear one, right? Because we hear people talk, but when you see everything, it comes together. And I think that's something you're spot on, that Jesus was very much a lead by example servant leader. Hey, he didn't just say, hey, go do this and then come back and report to me. He was there in the midst doing it all.
Mm-hmm.
So my second question was, because you were saying, hey, I turned to him for so much, for like, it's easy to turn to him for advice, right? When we pray, when we meditate and wait for him to speak back to us and so forth. Let me ask you, the second question was, what advice would you give to others if they're searching for their why, if they're searching for their purpose? Is there a distinct path somebody could take, or what worked for you?
So first of all, prayer, right? So prayer is, we know about conventional prayers and that thing, but really kind of taking off your guard and opening up your heart to the Holy Spirit, and finding out what you're passionate about, what motivates you, what excites you, even as little as asking yourself, what am I really proud of that I did this week? What's
Oh,
something
that's
that
good.
made me feel a sense of achievement, accomplishment, and it might have been holding the door for somebody, like as simple as that. But then, okay, I love to make people happy. I love to be a servant to people, right? And
Sure.
I love to use the word joy more than happiness, because I think happiness is a state of mind, where joy, we can experience joy in the most trying of times. Um, I think I'm going off on a little tangent here, Mike,
Please
but
do.
I think that I lost a daughter years ago.
Hmm. Yes, ma'am.
And one of the reasons why I felt so connected with you at the time, too, when I met you, was your wife is Brooke, and my daughter's name was Brooke.
Hmm.
And I'm like, "Oh, I've had these angels pop into my life that are little signs from her that, like, hey, I'm still with you." And that was one of them.
Hmm.
Um, but what I was trying to get to is, I forgot. No, so I had a very, very traumatic experience with losing her. And when she passed away, we had to make the decision to take her off of life support and everything.
Mm.
And at one of my most vulnerable moments, probably the saddest moment of my life, um, there were probably 17 people present in the room when we disconnected her off the respirator. And I knew I had to be a leader for my family at that time. So when I thought I wasn't going to be able to hand her body over to the doctor that, kept on taking her pulse and everything and her heart rate, I something snapped in my head that, like, I need to set the tone for my family. And I did. And I walked out of the room with my head held high and my shoulders back, and actually found joy in that moment. So the
Mm.
joy that I found was knowing that she was with Christ, right?
Sure.
So my faith definitely got me through that. Um, but there was a little leadership moment there as well, So these are the kinds of things that I like to impress upon people, that to really find joy in your heart, you need to align your passion, your purpose with your career, and all those things will come together. And I have strived for so many years to really blend my secular life with my spiritual life.
Hmm.
And I think that's what has happened is with the servant leadership is, um, WWJD, what would Jesus do in certain moments that you are faced with during the workday, right? WWJD.
Right.
And I, that's a hard thing, because a lot of people have very, very strong faiths and a great spiritual life, but it's kind of limited to Sundays. And then they're very, very
Right.
secular Monday through Friday, right? So how
Hmm.
do we blend that to become a beautiful tapestry of who we are, who our true self is? And that's something that I think if you meditate on that, you will find your true purpose.
I love that answer. And let me ask you a question, because I said it and I have a perception, and you just now said that. And I think it's important for folks to understand what a couple things. I'm going to go back for just a moment, because when we were chatting just prior to the show, I think there are a lot of people, and if you are in a leadership role, and one of the things that Nancy said here was, I just had this call that I had to be a leader for my family right then. Like, how did you know? How did you know that you had to be the one to be the tip of the spear, to be the leader and have the fortitude when that was going on? How did you know that?
I looked around the room, and everybody that was closest to me was there: my parents, my siblings, my husband's family, friends, godparents of my child. And I looked at my dad, who was a 240-pound tough guy, and
Mm,
he was falling apart in the corner of the room. And I
mm.
just was like, I can't have this. So I had to let them know that I was okay with it and that we will get through it. And I love the expression, when God brings you to it, he pulls you through it.
Yeah,
And that was one of those moments. He brought me to this situation and he guided me. I think it was more from him than my human self could have possibly done on its own.
sure.
But I attribute it to maybe her, her spirit as well,
Hmm.
encompassing me and giving me that strength and courage that we need as leaders, right? To be a
Sure.
leader, you have to be bold and courageous. And
Absolutely.
I showed audacity at that moment, that very weak and vulnerable moment in my life.
So the other thing that I heard you say, and thank you for sharing that, because that's, I mean, that's just so powerful, and I think it's valuable for people to hear that, to be able to learn from it. What Let me ask you a question. What is the difference? Because I said it, I have an opinion, but I'm curious to your take on it. What's the difference between prayer and meditation? Because you said, okay, well, we have to pray, and then sometimes we got to meditate on it. How do you differentiate the two?
So with prayer, it's always a conversation with God, with Jesus. Sometimes we pray to people who have passed on as intercessors to the Lord. So it's a two-way conversation. Meditation is just something within that you can do yourself. So it's really self-talk. It's digging deep, pulling back the onion skins.
Sure.
And that's my interpretation. And it doesn't always involve Jesus. It's more like digging down within.
I I like that definition. I've always said, for me, prayer is certainly us having that conversation. Meditation is me taking enough time to slow down and listen so that he can speak back to me.
Right.
And so, I think I was talking with somebody a couple shows ago, maybe, and one of the things that we were talking about is like, hey, nobody is talking to you more than yourself. Like you even said, hey, meditation, you're sitting talking to yourself, and you have to take
Mhm.
time to quiet your mind to hear back from him. So I think those are really, really very valuable pieces that you share here. So when we're talking about, let me ask you also, because we talk about leadership, and we've used the word leadership several times.
Mhm.
I think it's often hard to define something by using that same word to define it, if that makes sense. So I'm curious, if I were to take Nancy, out of the moment for a second and said, okay, well, how would you define, what are the characteristics, the key characteristics of leadership, people that you look to that you would want to follow? So maybe some characteristics that Jesus had that you say, yes, that I this person embodies that, and so I would follow that thing. What would those be, Nancy?
Yeah. And just to touch on that,
Yeah.
I think we're all called to leadership in one way or another in some segment of our lives. So a leader is not necessarily the manager or somebody that holds a position of power, right?
Right.
So sometimes you see leadership in very, very small children. And
Yes.
the characters, and especially in the innocent children, I think like I was as a child,
Hmm.
um, it's just integrity for one. So, I mean, it's so many great keywords and emotions that are all blended together. But to have integrity and to show compassion and empathy, and I have to really tell you that it took me years and years and years to figure this out, but when I tried to figure out like why I love leadership so much and why I
Hmm.
always try to promote myself to leadership roles through my life, um, I've been told that I have a grand capacity to love people, and that is true. And in that love comes care and listening, right? So a
Hmm.
good leader has to listen and really truly listen, not just hear, but listen to what the person's telling them and act upon that. Um, just empowering people to believe in themselves is just, to me, we're always building the next generation of leaders. It's a learning and growing. I always say, like, I'm going to hang it up the day that I don't learn something new. And I shared with you, I'm going on 64 years old. I don't feel it, but
You don't look it. So
I don't want to ever stop. I'm going to a personal trainer right now, and I just had a conversation with her yesterday about, I think once I get myself where I want to be, I'm going to create some sort of a clinic for women over 60 years old. And she's like, that's a great idea, Nancy. There's a need for it. So I'm already thinking ahead of how can I bring this into a leadership role?
sure.
Years ago, I did aerobics, and right off like 2 weeks into it, oh, we need an aerobics instructor. I became the aerobics instructor.
Surprise.
I
There's
know.
another place she said yes, folks. Just say yes. Take the opportunities when they show up.
Yeah. And I used to say yes all the time until I realized that I need to focus my energies and efforts where they're most needed. And sometimes when you're saying yes, you're saying no to 99 other things that might be more valuable to you in your life.
Sure.
So you really have to kind of balance the time that you have and project that effort into the right direction.
No, I hear you. And there's a fine line, because there's a fine line between, on one side, I'm over here saying, say yes, let's go, right? Take action and do this. At the same time, you want to be careful. I don't remember who said this to me years ago. They said, look, don't take every single, um, what did they say? Beware of distractions disguised as opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
And so you don't have to take every opportunity. Like, you do need to have some discernment and determine it. I want to recap here for a second, and there's one other thing too. Couple of things that I'm going to put up here on the screen. If anyone is so inclined and would like to connect with Nancy, I have her LinkedIn up on the screen for anybody that's listening. It's just linkedin.com/in/ Nancy Simmons, all spelled out, NancySimmons. She's the original, so she's there on LinkedIn. You can connect with her. A couple things that I heard you say when we're talking about characteristics of leaders, and you said a lot that are awesome. There's one that I want to hang on though. You brought up integrity and compassion and empathy. Somebody that takes action, like you said that sort of in passing, but I think that's really important, that you have to have somebody that's moving. They have to take action. They either have to be moving from the front so you can follow them, or sometimes they got to be pushing from the back, but they've got to be moving. If they're just there, holding the torch saying, hey, I'm a leader, because, and you said it earlier, it's not about a title, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's all of these things that encompass leadership. And then you said, listening and care. And one that I love is, you said love. Like, you have to have a genuine care for people to lead people. If you don't like people, my friend Ian said this back on one of my early shows, and he said it well, and you just brought it up again. He's like, if you don't like people, you can't lead people. Like, if you
I
can't,
love that.
and so you're saying, I did a show several years ago called Love and Leadership, and it's not like the romantic, cheesy, let's
Mhm.
go out kind of love. Like, it's actual genuine caring, that you have to love people to be a really effective leader. I think that's one thing that's really important to acknowledge for people.
Mike, I'd love to share a story that just popped up in my head
Yeah, absolutely.
with you and the guest of actually another dealership role that I have. So back in the day, I had aspirations to become a dealer.
Okay.
And I actually went through it. I got approved. I went through Dealer Academy, the whole bit. Um, but I got approved the point that I was trying to buy, did it. But
Okay.
it was right before the GM bankruptcy. So, God was listening and watching out for me. Um, but anyways, I was working for this dealer. He had a general manager. The general manager wasn't going anywhere. I went to NADA in Vegas, and this other dealer approached me and said, my wife and I would like to take you to dinner. And they offered me a job as the fixed ops director, which would be a stepping stone to the general manager position for the new dealership they were buying.
Okay.
So he said to me, I need you. I showed up on January 2nd. He said, I'm flying in from Florida. I want you to meet me in the very last parking space at the back fringe of the lot, almost in the trees. And I'll be there at 8 o'clock.
Okay.
So I went
8 a.m., 8 p.m.
8 a.m.
Just okay. 8 a.m.
So
Got it.
this is a kind of a powerful story where I got something. So
Yeah.
he walked me through the dealership, through the body shop, introduced me to each person, through the parts department, through recon, through the service department, leasing and rentals, through the office, through the showroom. Just introduced me, never really had a conversation with me, brought me upstairs into the conference room, said, follow me. And he took a red Sharpie and he wrote on the whiteboard in very, very, very large, bold letters, I care about you. And he
Hmm.
said, this is why I hired you, Nancy. He says, I know you've been a controller for years. You can tear a financial statement apart. You can give me all the KPIs and metrics that I need. But I knew when I met you that there was some compassion and empathy and a warmth about you. And I'm in Florida now, and I need somebody to let my people know I care about them. So I care about you, and I want you to convey this to my employees each and every day. So what a powerful message that was.
It is. It's still a powerful message.
Yeah.
So, because I like to share tangibles on the show, and you said something and you just hit on it, and this is great. You said, I care about you, and you want to show people that every day. In this case, he was saying, hey, show my employees that. But if you're in a leadership role, it is important to show people every day. So I'm going to ask you, Miss Nancy Simmons, what are some tangible ways, 2, 3, 4 things that you can do, no matter how large or small, as a leader in business, that will show other people that you care?
Yeah. Um, so one thing, and I'm not afraid to do this, I walk over to somebody and say, I care about you. What's going on in your life? Um, but, coming from the accounting background, we're always
Hmm.
very bottom line driven, right? And people, human capital, your personnel is the biggest expense on the financial statement, but
Yep.
your people are your greatest asset. So you really need to invest in them, and not in them with buying them pizza on Friday so much as investing in them and letting them be heard. And from an HR perspective, there's just so much we can do now. I'm a big advocate for one-to-ones weekly or
Hmm.
biweekly. And it's just basically meeting with them on a face-to-face basis and saying, hey, what's going on? What are I don't know if you ever heard of your rose and thorns and your buds, but your rose is like your best thing that happened to you this week. And your thorn would be like something you struggled with. And your bud is something that you're working on, but it's just not quite there yet.
That's
And
cool.
right? And find
Yeah.
out like what's going on? Where do you want to be? Not like the old question, where do you want to be in 5 years, but where do you want to be next week? What goal can we set for next week that I can help you get to? Another thing we do is like use your payroll or HR platform and have surveys. Just survey your people. They can they can reply anonymously, and give you some feedback about what's really happening. But when you take that feedback, you have to act upon it. So if you survey 50 people and 25 of them say we need better lighting and the service department, like get better lighting.
Sure.
So act upon it to show you care. And then another thing is we hear about exit interviews, which are always too late because people are gone. And you're like, oh, I wish I had known that. Do a stay interview. Do stay interviews with your people at least twice a year and find out what's going on. I always use the dealership because that's what I'm familiar with, but your
Hmm.
lot boy can tell you more about what's going on in the dealership than the general manager can. They talk to every single person throughout the day. They
Hmm.
truly know what's going on. So don't be afraid to ask them. And when you do, when you ask and you listen, you're showing that you truly care.
I think that's all really good too. It's funny that you say that. Hey, your lot technician or your lot attendant or your lot porter, whatever the term is that some may use, like they not only do they talk to everybody, but everybody talks to them, right? And so when you take the time, and they're one of the least, probably in most in the automotive dealer world, one of the least interviewed people by polled people by the people that are in the dealership, the GM. Like the if there's GMs listening to this, you should meet with your lot porter like once every 90 days and just give, or maybe more often than that, right? And you did say several times like you got to listen, you got to give feedback. I think it's so strong, and it's some of the simplest stuff is what's so valuable. You just tell them, like, high fives and hugs still go a long way. Hey, let me give you a high five, you did a good job on this.
Yeah.
And Karen says here, she says my son's a lot boy, and that's so true. So there you go, there you have it.
Love it.
One thing also, as we're rounding the turn here, there's two things I wanted to touch on with you because they've come up in some sort of facet a little bit each time as we're talking. There's two things that you put when you emailed me back your information that I wanted to touch on with you is accountability and communication. And you've said communication several times. I think
Mm-hmm.
what I'm hearing from you, the communication piece is, one, you have to be direct, and then two, you have to listen, when people are speaking back. We haven't touched a lot on the accountability piece. So from your perspective, you've been in HR for a long time. You've been a in an industry that's not always viewed as highly accountable.
Mm-hmm.
How do you hold people accountable, Nancy?
Yeah. So accountability is again one of those words that's really just thrown around.
It's a
But
buzzword.
it is a buzzword. But to be or to expect accountability from your team or your subordinates, you need to really define a clear and concise expectation of what their job and their role entails. So they can't achieve or even aim to achieve something that they're not really understanding. And that
Sure.
has to be done consistently, um, on a repetitive basis, and sometimes it changes and it's tweaked a little bit. But when you end up terminating an employee that is blindsided and has absolutely no idea, you know that you did not do your job of clearly defining what your expectations were. And then to hold people accountable is just really promoting honesty, promoting that, hey, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to screw up at one point, but bring it to the table. Let's look at it. Let's tear it apart and use it as a learning opportunity. And how can we do better next time? People are so afraid of coming to grips with like, hey, I did this, sometimes sweeping things under the table because
Hmm.
they're afraid of unfair ramifications, right? Of I might lose my job or I'm going to get written up, or there shouldn't be no fear at all of coming forward and presenting to you their mishap if they know that you're on board with them and we can take this and learn from it.
Sure. Well, and I think one of the things when it comes to, for myself, from accountability, when I'm communicating with my staff, is it's like you can make 10,000 mistakes and we'll talk about it, we'll learn from it, we'll move forward. The biggest struggle is, and I tell people this, just if you're going to make the same mistake over and over again, that's no longer a mistake, right? And you have to be accountable and own that you're making a decision.
Mhm.
So I think you're right on that. They have to feel safe in doing that. At the same time, you have to make sure when you're giving feedback to help them grow through that so they're not repeating that,
Mhm.
especially inadvertently,
Yeah.
right? So hey, we're actually, believe it or not, I just looked at the time. We're 45 minutes in. We keep I could chat with you for hours. So I'm just,
There's so much to share. I just
yeah,
wanted to finish with that,
yeah,
the accountability piece as far as, that's the part of the job that's not always so easy, right? Of just
right.
really being honest and firm. But if you're not and you tiptoe around it, what you're doing is you're not fair to the other 99 sheep, right? So those people that have to endure um, whatever ramification it is from that one person that's constantly screwing up. So you think you're being kind to that person, but you're really not. You have to look at the whole team and how they're going to come out of this.
Well, going back to your previous statement or our previous discussion, like having real accountability with somebody is showing that you care about them. It's not just showing that you care about them, because they may not know that they're messing up.
Mm-hmm.
And if you just sweep it under the rug, like you said, that if they don't know, that's not love for them. That's not care or kindness to them, because then it's just slowly deteriorating. It's driving you as a leader nuts, right? And you're,
Mm-hmm.
well, I don't want to say anything because I don't want to hurt their feelings. And then the other people around, it becomes like the elephant in the room. They're like, well, I don't want to say something to Mike. He must know that this guy keeps making this mistake. So I think you're spot on with that too. Is it's not fair to the rest of the team, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not fair to you as the leader. It's not fair to them either. Like, you have to have the fortitude to speak up and be willing to hold people accountable. Certainly. So in any as we come to the tail end here, any final thoughts that you want to leave us with for this afternoon?
Yeah. So just as a wrap up,
Yes.
I wasn't expecting to talk about like my daughter or any of that, but it just happened because I really hoped that this would be very genuine and an
Yes.
authentic conversation between two car people.
Yes.
But search for your inner leader, right? And I think in this day and age, we're living in a world right now that is very uneasy. And we're going to really have to hone into our leadership skills, whether it's just to lead our family to feeling safe and secure and trust. So hone in, pray, meditate, look for the character that you have, and don't be afraid to embrace it and to, I guess, empower yourself, promote yourself, as I call it,
Sure.
to a new level of leadership in your home, in your community, in charity, in your church, in your organization, in your workplace. Um, I hope that some of this helped. I really and truly enjoyed talking to you, Mike. And
I
next time
have
we
too.
won't wait 17 years.
Right. I know it's so wild. We've known each other for so long. I'll have to have you back on the show again, and then maybe if you start doing your morning devotionals, you did that for a brief time, or for a time, because you've reshared some of them. Maybe we
Mhm.
could get together on that too. I would love to collaborate with you on some more. So
That'd be amazing. I'd love it.
yeah, thank you. And for everybody, I'm going to put one more time on the screen. If you want to connect with the OG Nancy Simmons, someone said in the chat, you go to linkedin.com/N/Nancy Simmons. She doesn't have any numbers or anything after her name. It's just Nancy Simmons. You can find her on LinkedIn there. And just an awesome person. Beautiful soul. I am so thankful for you to have come on the show with me today. So if you want to hang out for just a
Yeah,
moment,
sure.
absolutely hang out for just a moment. I'll go ahead and take us out. So that, my friends, is going to bring us to a close for another episode of the Leadership Toolkit. As we say, this is an opportunity for you to grow yourself, for you to grow your spiritually, for you to grow your leadership, for you to grow your team and then your business. If you're an entrepreneur, for you to grow and move and really take to heart what a lot of these leaders are sharing with us, because it is so powerful and it's stuff that they've actually experienced. These are people that are on the front lines of leadership sharing with you. So I am very thankful. I appreciate your time. I hope you've gained a lot out of the show. Do me a favor, if you have, please share the show with somebody else that could stand to hear this message, and maybe bookmark it for yourself and come back here. Make sure you throw some thumbs up and some likes and subscribe to the channel. So you can check us out on Spotify and YouTube. Just look for the Leadership Toolkit. And until we speak again, stay great, everybody. We'll talk soon.